Remember when Glen Powell did that GQ cover story with all those bizarre photos? For me, the one that stuck the most was that American Psycho politician one. I really felt like they were onto something there. So I was really excited when we got what's essentially a feature-length trial run of Glen Powell as this kind of dark and violent character that's unlike anything he's played before. How to Make a Killing is a dark comedy from A24 that stars Glen Powell as Beckett, a man whose mother was cruelly disowned by her billionaire family, leaving them both in poverty. But eventually, Beckett's had enough and decides to get his hands on his inheritance, even if it means killing everyone in line before him. And so from there, he essentially starts wheedling his way into the lives of these rich people. He's going to their parties, their art exhibitions, their churches. One of them even gives him a job. He's finding ways into their lives, and he's trying to figure out the best way to dispose of them so he can get one step closer to that fortune. And this results in maybe my favorite Glen Powell performance to date. There are so many moments in the movie that work purely because of what he's doing with his performance. There are lots of loaded silences where he's kind of backed into a corner by whoever he's talking to, and he's about to be exposed, and he's thinking of what to say, and he's conning his way out of these very sticky situations. And I thought he was really good here. He has to bounce off a variety of characters, and he's super effective in every environment that the film puts him in. And like I said, there's just this darkness to this character that I haven't seen Powell pull off this effectively before. And this being an A24 film, you kind of suspect that there's going to be a vision here, and there is. There's a specificity to the movie that really adds some meaningful texture to it. There's an early scene at a piano recital that I thought made it feel much more real and lived in because of how distinct and personal it felt. And there's moments like that throughout that I think save this movie from being a really generic Eat the Rich film. The cinematography is also really nice. A24 movies generally feel more grounded and textured than most of what's out there, and this one is no different. It comes to us from writer-director John Patton Ford, who made the very above-average Emily the Criminal a few years ago, and once again, he's very confident behind the camera. And the movie has this sense of inevitability because it opens with Beckett in prison with only a few hours until his execution. So we know that things don't ultimately pan out for him, and something goes wrong with his plan. And because of that, as we're watching the movie, we see multiple nooses that are kind of closing in. There's the FBI that's trying to figure out what's going on with all these deaths in the family, and there are some other characters who know Beckett personally, who are beginning to suspect him a little bit. And you're kind of wondering which noose is going to close in first. What's going to be the thing that gets him? And this kind of framing device where you meet someone after the meat of the story takes place and they kind of recount the events to another character is a double-edged sword for me because, like I said, it does use the inevitability to its advantage in certain ways, but at the same time, it gets kind of clunky when the timelines converge towards the end of the movie and we're learning stuff now in real time as opposed to Glen Powell's character telling us what happened. I found that the outro was like very overly explained in a way that definitely took away from the impact. I think this movie is at its best when it's really leaning into the American Psycho side of Beckett. And I think it's at its worst when it's trying to do anything more heartfelt. There's a coldness that I think makes this movie tick really well. And whenever it tries to move in a more relatable or warm direction, I think it lost what was making it special. The movie's never boring, but the pacing is definitely weird. I feel like there's a miniseries worth of material here, and I'm saying that knowing full well that way too many books these days are turned into miniseries when they would make for much better feature-length films. But there's so much that has to happen over the course of this runtime, and the whole cast is doing such a good job of bringing these characters to life. People like Bill Camp, Zach Woods, Topher Grace, Ed Harris, and Jessica Henwick are all doing a great job, but their characters aren't given enough room to really breathe. The different episodes of the story where he's taking down these rich people in their vastly different environments that they've cut out for themselves is really exciting, but it's taking place so quickly and we don't get to see how much preparation had to go into it. It just doesn't feel like we're getting the most out of these vignettes. In many ways, this movie feels a bit to me like the works of Donna Tartt. I think that the storytelling in The Goldfinch and The Secret History are actually kind of indicative of what this movie needed, but it's never really able to get on that woozy, delirious wavelength because it's not given enough time. But inadequate runtime is not the only problem here. There are a lot of really insane leaps in this movie. There's never really 3 consecutive believable scenes strung together, and the satire just isn't always sold well enough to get me there. Towards the end, we get like some Parasite-esque action and violence that just doesn't feel very earned. And I haven't mentioned one very important player in this movie, and that is Margaret Qualley. She plays a very important role, and it's unclear why for the majority of the runtime. You don't fully understand what she's doing in the story until you do. And I don't think this movie employs her talents very well. It's not her fault, but the energy of this character is just not captured. I think she's cast properly, but somewhere between the conception of this character and the final depiction, something got lost, and she's just not used to gin up near as much tension as I think she should have been. There's an aspect of doubt as to whether or not she knows what Beckett's up to, but that is resolved so quickly that the tension is gone almost instantly, and the unpredictable, wily energy that we know she's capable of bringing just isn't really here because she's constrained by a pretty poorly written character. I think this whole movie could have used a lot more Margaret Qualley energy, to be honest. Maybe that's the biggest problem here. At the end of the day, I had a fun time with How to Make a Killing, but the fun is entirely contained to the runtime itself. The lack of wit and thematic depth keep it from really growing on you after the fact, but the cast and the presentation make it really entertaining. The biting satire of it all just isn't really there, but as an over-the-top caper, I think it works. And for all of those reasons, How to Make a Killing gets a B. If you have seen this movie, please do let me know what you thought of it. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, and I'll catch you at the movies.